This is Salam Radio, Peterborough's Muslim community radio, broadcasting on 106.2 FM and online.
Hold on. Sorry.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم إذا وقعت الواقعة ليس لوقع.
Sorry. They are away for 1 week and we forgot how to operate this place.
My apologies.
Assalamu alaikum and welcome to the Secrets of a Good Life show on Salam Radio 106.2 FM. You're listening to Ruqia
and Madhia.
As we said, we were not here last week and obviously we've completely forgotten what we were doing. But sorry, technicalities here. So, we weren't here last week because, for a number of issues. But the week before that, Madhia was away in Italy. So, how was it?
I was holidaying in Italy with my family. There was 11 of us,
Wow.
adults and children. And it's the first time I've travelled with a big family. And obviously there were lots of mishaps, but you've got to go along with it, have a laugh.
Yeah.
Things are meant to go the way they are. I'm not a city break person, but the islands are beautiful and definitely had time to relax. And I did lots of walking, which was great.
Good. I hope you rejuvenated and ready to get stuck into this show today.
I'm ready to go.
Okay, so why don't I let you recap?
Yeah, and before I do that, we would really like you to contact us maybe with comments, contributions or questions. And you can do that on 01733 602 133, or you can text on 07411 191062. You can also comment on live stream on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter or Twitch. So please do send in your comments and contributions. We'd love to hear from you. We want this to be as interactive as possible. So we want to recap what we were recapping from 3 weeks ago.
Yeah.
Okay. So there's a recap for us just as much as you. What we left off with. What we were talking about is healing. And we were talking about how to have a good life. And what we finished off with is that the mind, body and soul are interdependent. They're interweaving, they're interlinked. This means that they're inseparable. Well, maybe they could be separated, but it'd be difficult to separate them without causing some sort of compromise or even harm to any of these. So really the best way to reach harmony and the best way to work with them is to work with them in unison, treating them as one because that's what they are. And so that means looking after yourself spiritually must be taken into account when looking after you as a whole.
And
go on.
On that point, it also goes the other way around, right? Because
Yeah.
I think often I find, particularly amongst practicing Muslims, this idea that, looking after yourself spiritually means, staying up at all hours. It might mean fasting all the time. It might mean not really paying attention to what you're eating, whether you're exercising because you don't have time for that because you're too busy with your spiritual practices. But actually looking after yourself spiritually has got to take into account looking after yourself mentally and physically. And hopefully through the rest of this show, we will kind of give you a good idea, we hope, of why
Yeah,
that's necessary.
and really something that we notice is the more spiritual a person is, there's this apparent understanding that they don't look after their body, they don't look after their physical health, they don't look after their mental health, they just focus on the spirituality. But really our body has rights over us, and that's part of the spirituality, is because God has given this to us as a gift, as an amana, as a trust. And so when someone gives a gift to you and they're asking you as an amana, as a trust really, more than a gift that's given away, it's something that they're leaving with you to take care of and then they will take back. So an amana, a trust, would be a more appropriate term to use. So when someone gives something to you as an amana, as a trust, you have to look after it to the best of your ability over and above other things, because you want to return it at least in the same state, if not better. And so this is another reason why we really can't separate the body from the spirituality.
That's interesting, isn't it? Because I was talking to my brother earlier about looking after yourself, and we were talking about diet and eating well, etc. And he said he's studying at Al-Azhar, and
Mashallah,
he's
yeah.
going into his final year. He's going to be back next year, fully qualified as an
Inshallah.
imam, inshallah. So he said, I'm determined not to come back as a typical Maulvi with a big belly.
We all have an idea of, we've all had that picture. As soon as he said, as a typical Maulvi, we got the picture of a big belly and sitting around. And this is not true, obviously, for all people. But unfortunately, why does this picture come to our minds is because this is what we see once too often.
Yeah, exactly. And it's interesting because we know when we look at the descriptions of the Prophet ﷺ, we know that even when he passed away, and he passed away at the age of 63, his belly was completely flat. Like his chest and his abdomen were in line. And how many people in their 60s have a completely flat belly, especially men?
Forget 60s. Look at 40s, 35.
Yeah, exactly.
As soon as you pass the 30s, it's just things start to change.
Yeah.
But there seems to be kind of like an acceptance that actually this is the way my body is heading. This is normal, and so this is expected. And actually, when we see someone that doesn't have a belly that is goes beyond the chest, then we think, oh wow, what do you do? What do you do that makes you so different? Because we treat them as an exception.
Right, because I think we have this idea, sometimes I think that if something is common, it's normal.
And it's right.
Yeah, exactly. And a lot of diseases are common, but they're still diseases.
Yeah.
They're not normal.
And fat, I mean,
Obesity.
you're better to speak about this. What I understand is fat that's held around the belly is the worst place to hold fat.
Yeah,
Is that
it
right?
essentially acts as an organ of its own. And it
Oh,
produces
ouch.
inflammatory chemicals that are like hormones in your body. So yeah, so this idea that you can carry like extra weight around the middle and still be healthy, no, because that weight itself is a symptom, and a symptom means that there's something going wrong in your body somewhere.
Absolutely. But before we go into this show, we want to talk about. So we've said that. To have a great life and to really enjoy healing and to live a balanced and aligned life, we need to work with spirituality, mind and body in unison, because they are interlinked, interweaved. And if you're wondering how we're making this claim, then listen to one of our first two shows, and they go into detail with the research as to why they are interlinked and we can't separate them. But we were having this discussion, and in our show, how much are we going to talk about spirituality, Dr. Ruqia?
Yeah.
Like, what are you comfortable with?
Not a lot. So neither of us are qualified in any way in spirituality, in any kind of spiritual science. We'd like to think we have the basics of Islam and the basics of, our own daily practice. Even that can be rusty at times. But we certainly have no kind of detailed knowledge of spirituality. Having said that, spirituality doesn't have to be complicated, and it isn't.
It is not. For our own practice, it's not complicated.
Yeah, exactly.
However,
it's accessible to everybody. However, when it comes to guiding other people in terms of their spirituality, we aren't qualified.
we're
to
not
do
in that position, yeah.
So while we want to make it clear that spiritual health, physical health, and mental health, even splitting them into those three terms is difficult to do because they're so interlinked.
But we're only doing it to make it easier for you to
give us a frame of reference, and to give us basically a terminology that we can use that's familiar.
That's familiar, yeah.
But having said that, our forte really is the mind and the body.
Absolutely.
And in terms of spirituality, that will practically, it will come out because we can't separate our spirituality from the rest of our lives, right? We can't. We've already said that.
Yeah.
But we're not going to go into any kind of detail on that. For that, inshallah, we will be bringing you experts in that area, people who have studied Islam, people who have knowledge of spirituality, who have actually studied it. And therefore, they'll be able to be in a better position to be able to talk about it.
Absolutely. And so if you do notice us making any claims about spirituality, just know that these are our personal experience and our personal understanding, and it's not at all representing any viewpoint or any particular spiritual practice.
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly not us telling you what Islam is.
Absolutely. And, more than likely, there's going to be discrepancies. So please be mindful and refer to your own teachers when you're looking at spirituality and understanding spirituality. That said, I feel much more comfortable because I think both of us were feeling a bit uncomfortable in mentioning spirituality and how it's interlinked, but not being able to mention it enough to, help you understand how it's interlinked. What are we going to do to combat that? How are we going to help ourselves here? we're going to be inviting teachers that are qualified. They are teachers who have studied for over a decade with institutions, etc., reputable institutions, and they will come onto this show and talk to you about how spirituality is linked to the mind and body, and we're really excited about that.
Yeah.
But in the meantime,
but just to reiterate, actually, I can just hear my dad, if he listens to this show, I can just hear him going, spirituality is not complicated, and you're making it into something, that isn't accessible to people. And, I would agree with him. We're not saying here that spirituality is for scholars only.
No, not at all.
Spirituality is our daily practice,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
It's our
From the
connection
baby
with
to
Allah.
the elder, we all practice spirituality.
Yeah, but we don't want to become doctors of spirituality here.
We're not teaching any rules and any sort of like framework of spirituality. We're not in that position to share any framework of spirituality.
Exactly.
But we'll share our experiences and our observations.
Yep.
Does that sound fair?
I think so.
If that doesn't sound fair, and if you've got other suggestions, just throw us a line on Facebook or YouTube or Twitter or Twitch, or call in on 01733 602 133, or text us on 07411 191062. Brilliant. Okay, so let's move on and talk about the mind and the body.
Yeah, I mean, right at the beginning, this hadith, we were talking about this hadith, right? There's a saying of the Prophet ﷺ where he said, the strong believer is better than the weak believer. And I think that can mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people. And the way I see it is actually a healthy person, and health can be in any aspect, right? Any aspect of you, any part of you. And obviously that means in your religion and physically what you're able to do, and your resilience, etc. All of these things are part of your strength.
Your vitality.
Your vitality, exactly. So we kind of want to focus on that a little bit and realize that this is part of faith. This is part of our faith, to look after yourself in every way that you need to look after yourself. And for different people, that's going to be different things that need focus.
And we've seen examples of that, haven't we, with our clients? And did you want to share some of these examples? Because these are real life examples with clients in the recent times of how they're experiencing the impact of their health or negative health, and how it's impacting their spirituality.
Yeah, I mean, a very common thing I come across as a GP, and every Ramadan, this is the day before Ramadan is supposed to start, I'll get messages from people saying, I'm diabetic, I want medication, should I be fasting? And for a lot of people can fast, even if they're diabetic. Obviously, it's individual. But for some of them, they can't fast because of their diabetes. They might be on insulin. Their blood sugars are not well controlled enough for them to be able to fast. There's risk of them dropping too low and becoming very sick with that. So there are people who want to be able to fast, which is a spiritual act, but they can't because of what's going on in terms of their physiology, in terms of what we call physical health. And that's just one example of where what's going on in the body is having an impact on your ability to be able to worship Allah in the way you'd like to. Now, we're not at all saying that the people who are diabetic and therefore can't fast are spiritually not as good as anybody who is fasting. No. In fact, if you leave off fasting, in order for your health, or if you leave off any act of worship in a position where Allah has commanded you to leave it, and there are situations where we can't do certain acts of worship, you're actually obeying Allah in doing that.
Absolutely.
However,
that is spirituality.
And that's spirituality. But people do feel that
in their own words,
that they're missing out. They feel like they're missing out on that vibe you get in Ramadan, and that feeling, together with everybody else.
Or maybe just the accomplishment of fasting for 30 days.
Yeah, and all of that. So they feel that they've missed out, and it's because there's something going on in the body, and that's now impacting their spirituality. So that's just one simple example how looking after your body will mean that you go on worshipping Allah in the way that you want to worship Him for as long as you're living, inshallah.
And so I can share an example of someone who was suffering from depression, and it was so severe that she was actually apprehensive about Ramadan coming, because the previous Ramadan was a horrible experience for her. I think it's a lot to do with, we have these expectations of how our Ramadan should be, and how it needs to be better than the previous Ramadan, and how when we, even within this Ramadan, we look at what other people are achieving, and then we compare it to ourselves and think, oh, well, she's reading, a juz a day, or she's reading 3 juz a day, chapters of the Quran. And then we compare it with ourselves. But when you're suffering from depression, this client was suffering from depression, and she could just about fast, and had to rest the whole day, wasn't able to pray the long salah at the end of the night, tarawih, was struggling to wake up for fajr. And I could see, when having this conversation with this client, is that I could see her being sucked into a further negative dark hole, that I knew that if she continued to experience this next Ramadan under this experience of depression, that she's going to come out worse on the other side of Ramadan than better. And this is true for some people. It really happens. And now, alhamdulillah, we got in there just in the nick of time, just before Ramadan. And alhamdulillah, she was able to experience, Ramadan that she was happy with. But it just goes to show how mental health can impact spirituality.
Yeah.
And just in this example, this client wasn't just suffering from depression. That was the mental depression and anxiety. That was the mental health. But physically, the client was struggling with, eating, diet, and being able to kind of manage her weight, and being able to, she found that she was craving lots of carbs and sugar, and then she felt highs and lows, and her body was exhausted, and she thought she had adrenal fatigue, and so she had the fatigue that she was anticipating, apprehensive about, that she is going to experience during this Ramadan. And so this one example, and there are many examples, I just want to share this one because it's one of the recent ones, where the client is impacted physically, mentally, and spiritually. And they all are impacting each other. You can't say one thing led to the other. And you don't, what came first, the chicken or the egg. Yeah. It's really difficult to point your finger at, because the body works in such amazing ways, and it's impacted by so many things, and so is the mind, and so is the spirituality. And really, this is kind of like the proof that they are interweaved, interlinked, and interdependent.
But also, and I'm sure I've mentioned this quote in every single show we've had so far, but
must be a very important one.
It is important. I've actually got it on my board in my study. How you do anything is how you do everything. And also how you think
I need to
about
memorize
everything.
this, because next time you say, I have a quote that I
say
always
it.
say, I better say it. Or someone, or one of you guys, can you just type in next time she says, I have a quote, just type it in quickly before she says it.
It's a good one. It's a good one.
No, it's absolutely true. How you do anything is how you do everything.
And also how you think about anything is how you think about everything.
Yeah.
So,
did you just add that? Did you just add to that?
This is me.
Yay. Can we trademark that quote, please?
Right,
Dr. Ruqia, how you think about anything is how you think about everything. Yeah.
Want to see that one.
Want to see on Instagram, okay.
All right.
Remember to share. I'm joking.
Anyway, back to the show. So our spirituality, or our spiritual way of our way of looking at the world is impacted by our belief system that comes from Islam, and our relationship with God, and how the Prophet, peace be upon him, taught us to look at ourselves and look at the world.
Oh,
right?
so are you talking about religious belief system or just general belief system? Because
both. But our religious belief system is going to have an impact on how we look at anything else. So,
but also how our belief system outside of the religious belief system, so what we believe about ourselves, the beliefs that we carry, can impact our religious belief system.
Yeah, so it goes both ways.
It goes both ways.
But particularly what I wanted to say here was that our spiritual approach to the world, and we had that a few weeks ago, we had that talk with Sheikh Walid Mossad about our approach to the environment, and I think he kind of went into this there. But in terms of health, the way we spiritually approach the world and the way we see it will have an impact on how we see health. So we have this idea in Islam that the Prophet again told us that every child is born on fitrah, and then the child's parents will turn it into a Muslim or a Jew or a Christian or whatever he or she is going to be. But that fitrah, it doesn't just relate to us spiritually. My belief as a doctor and my philosophy of medicine is that, and I've been thinking about this lately on what is it that makes my practice different, and it is that I believe that our bodies came into this world in a state of balance.
Aligned.
Aligned, and I guess you can call this fitra. And then things happen over time that take us away from that fitra. So
Body, mind, and spirituality came in alignment, in balance.
in a state of fitra, right?
Yeah, totally enough.
Yeah, completely. And knowing also, not just being in a state
Yes,
of balance,
but knowing that we
they're
are.
in a state of balance. And then as time goes on and you go through different experiences and you see other people around you and their way of dealing with things, particularly our parents and our main caregivers and the people who are around us the most, and we start shifting out of that state of balance, and that happens in the body and it happens mentally. Mentally, we know that psychologically people come with things like feeling they don't matter, or that they're not good enough, or
They're too different.
or they're not lovable, or whatever else it might be, and then that leads to a whole load of secondary issues.
Yeah.
But that can be often one of these issues is the core issue that's causing
Yes.
these issues, the rest of the issues that I'm presenting with. So in terms of health, I mean, if you believe that our body came in a state of balance, we came into the world in a state of balance, then our approach to health is going to be very different. We're not going to be like, oh, my body's just dysfunctioning and there's something wrong with me.
There's something. This is it. When we believe there's something wrong with something, then
it's unfixable.
yeah,
right?
it's unfixable. It's irreparable.
broken.
It's doomed for failure.
Exactly.
It's broken, and
The best
we
you
can
do is
replace
manage.
Yeah, I mean, we can replace everything else in life. We can't replace ourselves.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
Because we've got into a culture of just replacing things.
Yeah.
We can't replace ourselves. So we have to manage. We have to live with it.
Yeah, and then we
Because
try
it's
and
a part of us. It's us.
yeah,
I am like this.
exactly. And then we'll say I am anxious, or I am diabetic, or I am whatever it is that I am. But when we start looking at these things as, okay, this is me moving away from balance.
Balance and
Why
alignment.
has it happened?
Absolutely.
What's going on in my environment that's moved me out of balance, and what can I do to get myself back into that state of balance?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's so vital in the work that we do, in the way that we talk to
Absolutely.
people, and really it's vital for anybody to take this approach when
Yeah.
looking at their own
And when we're
healing.
talking about environment, though, I mean, someone might think like environment as in trees, grass, sky.
Yeah,
And we don't
yeah.
mean, we're not just referring, I mean, that
mean, that's-
also,
yeah.
but when we talk about environment, we're also talking about the people around us,
the
the
people
food.
around you, but also the thoughts in your head that you're
Oh,
feeding
absolutely,
yourself,
yeah.
the food that you're putting into your body, obviously your relationships, how much time you're spending in nature, obviously things like pollution that we normally think of when we think of the environment, but it's
Yeah.
a lot more than that. It's what are you immersed in?
Yeah,
What's
it's what
going around you?
your five senses have been exposed
Yeah,
to, basically.
exactly.
And that's our environment. So by environment, we're not referring to like the green, what people normally refer to as environment, but really what your five senses are exposed to is your environment. And so when you are out of balance, so away from health, and what we need to do is start looking at this environment, the environment that is perceived by our five senses.
Yeah.
So when we're doing that,
When we do that, I think one of the things it does when we start doing that is we are no longer, we've already said, you're not treating yourself as something broken and unfixable and inherently faulty in some way. You're actually coming to you.
can I just stop you on that inherently faulty? Because a lot of times, like, I'm diabetic because my mum is, or because my dad, or I have heart disease,
Yeah,
I had a stroke. And so we ultimately assume that we are going to suffer these because, genetically my family are inclined to this. And, there's truth in that we have an inclination.
Yeah.
However, that doesn't mean that that is what our experience is going to be. We are still looking at our environment. We are still looking at what we are exposing ourselves to and with our five senses. And we are also looking at how we are, if we do ever feel imbalance and misalignment, how do we bring ourselves back to alignment? Because we can break that
Yeah, your genes
genetic,
are not your destiny.
they're
Your
not a
genes are
destiny.
not your
And we
destiny.
can break that genetic pattern.
Yeah.
Sorry, I just had to break that.
No, very good interruption. So when we have this approach of I'm not inherently faulty, there's something going wrong in my environment, and I need to think about what's happening and what I can do to change it. First of all, it gives you hope that healing is possible.
It gives you power, right?
It
It
empowers
gives
you
power
completely,
back
yeah.
to you, because that's one thing that we do. And sometimes we kind of like, we do this intentionally, and sometimes it's inadvertent. We remove power from ourselves.
We hand it over to someone else, the doctor, the government, whatever, someone out there who, might be able to fix you.
Or my genetic,
Or
I hand the power over to my genetics.
Yeah. And we can either end up adopting, well, we can, not either, you will end up adopting there's almost victim mentality of these things are not in my control.
Yeah,
There's nothing
yeah.
I can do about them. And of course, we believe in destiny, but destiny doesn't mean that nothing is not controlled. We still have to,
Tie our camel.
yeah, exactly.
And by tie our camel, we mean, we're referring to hadith just in case, as you know, someone doesn't really know what that reference is you're good with detail, Ruqia. Are you going to jump in and help me
What,
out
the
here?
hadith?
The hadith, yeah, because you know I'm totally going to misquote who said this.
I don't want to go into the details of the hadith. I vaguely seem to remember it's...
Someone was traveling, and so basically they put their camel to one side and they went over to the shops, and someone said to them, you know, why are you leaving your camel unattended? It's like, well, I'm leaving in trust of Allah. And they said, no, tie your camel.
Yeah, yeah.
So
And
we leave
actually
things in
there's
the trust of Allah, but we also need to tie our camel.
I'm just remembering this funny story we used to
We've got
read.
40 seconds for your funny story, by the way, or shall we do it after the adverts?
I can probably do it.
Go
So
on, 36 now.
A shepherd left his sheep in the forest, came home, and his brother said, where are the sheep? He said, I've left them in the forest. And he said, in whose care? And he said, Tawakkal Allah, you know, in Allah's trust. And he said, the wolves also live in that forest. In the
Tawakkal
trust-
Allah.
Yes.
And you just gave them their gift of the day. They're going to be
There you go.
feasting on the sheep. Well, we're about to go into a break, and please do stay tuned and come back. I'm going to give you an experience, a takeaway, a tool to help you bring yourself back into balance. See you soon.
Inshallah.
Stay tuned to Salam Radio after this short ad break.
Asia Restaurant gives you the unique fusion of flavours from Turkey, Iraq, Syria and Iran. Our shish kebabs are grilled on a charcoal barbecue for that authentic taste. Lamb shanks, fresh shawarma, chili kebab, lamb shish, grilled chicken, freshly made baklava and so much more. Eat in or order through Peterborough Eats or Peterborough Grab. Asia Restaurant, 5 Fitzwilliam Street, Peterborough, PE1 2RU. Call us on 01733 562 530. Great prices, great quality. Why not come and find out for yourself? Asia Restaurant, the true taste of the Middle East.
मैं महानूर मजीद हूँ और कोट मेरा एक खूबसूरत आशियाना है जहाँ मेरे जैसे हजारों यतीम और बेसहारा बच्चों की कफालत बेहतरीन अंदाज में की जा रही है। आए हमारे सरों पर दस्ते शफकत रखें और इस माह रमज़ान अपने सदक़ात, खैरात और एहतियात से हमारी कफालत में अपना हिस्सा डालें। अल्लाह पाक आपका दिया हुआ माल अपनी बारगाह में कबूल फरमाए। आमीन।
Code UK office
0300 123 774 code.org.uk.
At Cake Inn, all our cakes and slices are freshly baked for that delicious taste. At Cake Inn, we bake 100% vegetarian and halal eggless fresh cream cakes. Delicious flavoured cakes for birthdays and weddings, ceremonies and all other occasions, with free customised messages, even balloons and candles too. Order for delivery or collection from Cake Inn, 489 Lincoln Road, PE1 2PE, and your cake could be ready within 2 hours. Find out more and order online at cakein.co.uk or call 01733 496 584.
Peterborough. Who said good quality fried and grilled chicken has to be expensive? At Sam's, we take pride in every piece of chicken that leaves our kitchen. Just one bite of our chicken or burgers is all it takes to realise we are the best. Visit us at our brand new place at 333 Lincoln Road, PE1 2PF. Or order a delivery through Just Eat, Uber or Deliveroo. Sam's, the home of great tasting chicken for over 30 years.
HS Lawyers make it so simple. Contact Majid Sarwar or Asad Arif today for any matters relating to immigration, family, business or property. Google HS Lawyers to see why we're the highest reviewed firm in Peterborough, with over 500 testimonies on our honesty, speed and excellent communication, making your legal matter simple, easy and stress-free. Contact us today on 01733 703 978. That's 01733 703 978, or email us at peterborough@hs-lawyers.co.uk. HS Lawyers, built on values of integrity and respect, with offices in Peterborough and throughout the West Midlands.
Facebook at Salam Radio.
Assalamu alaikum and welcome back to the Secrets of a Good Life show.
That was a nice, that was a smooth return.
Unlike the beginning.
I'm impressed.
Alhamdulillah.
We learn quickly.
Alhamdulillah. So, we were just talking about how this interlinked nature of the mind, body, the soul, how spiritually we are impacted by what's going on in our mind and our body, but vice versa also, and how we approach life is impacted by where we are spiritually.
And we were also talking about how when we're away from health, then we're away from fitrah, and we're just, all it means is we're out of balance.
Yeah.
And we're not, there's nothing wrong with us. We're just out of balance. We're just misaligned. And we just need to look at what's happening in our environment. By environment, we mean whatever we experience with our five senses, and look at what we need to tweak to bring ourselves back into balance, and which is health.
Great summary.
Thank you. You're a great teacher.
Really? I didn't teach you that. So, I guess the whole point of saying all of that is that any approach to healing, any approach to improving our lives has got to take into account all three of these aspects of us as human beings.
It needs to be wholesome. It needs to be holistic. I know this is kind of like, may sound like the new fad, like everyone's talking about being holistic and everyone's talking about being wholesome and wholesome foods and holistic therapy and holistic this, but you need to see through all of that and understand actually what they bring to you. I don't know when someone says that they're bringing to you a holistic or wholesome therapy or food, but actually the idea is really true.
Yeah, as long as, I think where this can become a fad and have no substance is where when we say holistic, all we mean is we're replacing drugs with herbs or supplements or even diets. But actually, it's a lot deeper than that. Hopefully, what we've spoken about so far will give you an idea of why it's all a lot deeper than that. So we had this question from someone, and I think it's quite relevant here in helping us sort of put into practical reality some of the concepts that we're talking about. So I had a question from someone who has been listening to the show, and she said she suffers from anxiety, and she said, sometimes when it's really bad, and she also gets depression when things are really bad, and I'm really focused on trying to help myself in terms of the anxiety and the depression and focusing on my mental health. How do I balance that with things like praying? Madhia, why don't you kind of take that and see what you have to say about that? How does one balance looking after themselves mentally with looking after themselves spiritually?
So did you want me to share that with an example, or how do we balance it?
Yeah, go on. Example, whichever way you like.
All right, okay, let me give you an example. So an example actually I want to share with is a more recent client. And let's talk about her mental health. So, as Dr. Ruqia, you mentioned a little while ago, some of the values, basic beliefs that we have as human beings, and, the core beliefs. And we could maybe just frame them into three core beliefs that we have. I am enough. I'm different, or everything's available to me.
Yeah.
These are kind of like three core beliefs that if there's any compromise to any of these beliefs, then that's one of the ways we can be out of balance. So this client, the thing that she was suffering with, the belief that she was suffering with is I'm enough. She didn't feel like she was enough because she needed to be perfect. And she was always trying to be perfect for her parents, always trying to be perfect for her siblings, always trying to do the right thing and get the best marks, etc. But what it meant, she was away from her family because she was in a boarding school, and she was feeling quite lonely, and she didn't want to be there, and she wanted to go back. She did mention to her family that she wants to go back home, but her family, I think, didn't take it quite seriously enough, but also she didn't maybe present it in a way where it was serious. So it was kind of like just passed. Mm. But she was really desperate to get out of there, really desperate to be close. There's nothing wrong with a boarding school per se. She also wanted to be there, but she also wanted to be close to her family. What happened over the years is physical ailments started to present themselves. And because she was saying to her body that I'm not enough, and I have to be perfect, but I don't know how to be perfect, and I can't be perfect. I'm afraid of letting people down. I'm afraid of disappointing people. And she needed a reason to be back home without disappointing people. And the reason that the body came up with was a physical ailment. I don't want to go into the details of the physical ailments, but I just want to mention that basically she reached a point where she was disabled. By disabled, I mean she wasn't physically able to look after herself. She became dependent upon other people, her caregivers. And so when we did this session, we realized the reason. One of the other things she mentioned is that since she's become disabled, she's not able to pray, like, standing and then going down to ruku and then going down to sujood, the prostration. And that's impacting her spiritual health. And so she found herself going into, again, a dark well of sadness and loneliness and depression, because she's not only now got a physical ailment, she's got the mental health ailment of I'm not enough. Also spiritual ailment of not being able to pray. I mean, obviously Allah has given us that allowance that if you can't pray standing, then your prayer is accepted just as equally in whatever position that is physically possible for you. But in her words, she felt that she wasn't connecting spiritually, and it was impacting her spirituality. And because it was impacting her spirituality, she was moving away from God.
Okay.
Isn't it so profound? With hers, it was identified that it started off with a belief, but that's not to say that is this true for everyone else. But for her, her belief of not being enough led her all the way to experiencing lack of spirituality, and see how that connected.
Okay, so
in an unseemingly way, you would never have thought.
You would never
She
make
was
that
shocked
connection.
also. I mean, I know it made sense in the end because she could see the pattern, but when it surfaced, it was like that aha moment, like that.
She would never have got that.
She never would have got that. Yeah.
And I guess relating it back to the question that we had about, well, how do I balance between my prayer and looking after myself mentally? Well, the first thing is, the part of that work is going to be uncovering why you're feeling that way mentally in the first place. And if your intention for doing that is also for it to benefit you spiritually, that's,
becomes worship, right?
It becomes worship to do that. And that's one thing. The second thing I'm thinking about is that there's an inherent belief in this question, and that is that looking after myself mentally and looking after myself spiritually are two separate things. And actually, as we've said, they are not. So if you're looking after yourself mentally, part of that is going to be standing in front of Allah to pray. So if you reframe coming to prayer as doing something right now for my mental health, that then it's not I'm coming away from looking after myself mentally to do something else. You are looking after yourself.
It's part and parcel.
It's part and parcel of dealing with that anxiety and dealing with that depression.
It reminds me of the Sahaba, and I'm not going to quote the name of the Sahaba. I want to, but I think it's Ali radiallahu anhu who said this, but I could totally be wrong. But inshallah, you can correct me. One of the Sahaba said that prayer is relief.
Right, okay.
Do you know who it was?
Yes. No, I don't know who it was.
Okay. Yeah, prayer is relief. Because when they are in prayer, this is their kind of like self-care for their mental health.
Right, and didn't the Prophet, peace be with him, say, he would say to Bilal, he would say, oh Bilal, relieve us. Like, bring us relief by doing the adhan, by making the call to the prayer. So prayer is relief. And if you're struggling with it in some kind of way, it might mean that
there's a belief.
Right.
Sorry,
you've got to uncover the underlying belief that's causing that in the first place. But also, you still need to maintain it. So what you do is maintain it in tolerable steps. So for you, standing up for tahajjud that night is probably not an option at that point. Don't put yourself in a position where you're putting pressure on yourself to do that.
Be kind to yourself.
Be kind to yourself. And maybe you're not going to be able to do long prayers, and that's okay. But the fact that you come to prayer, that's an achievement, and you really come to the prayer and then really congratulate yourself on being able to do that despite the difficulty, and recognize that that's part of your spiritual strength.
Absolutely.
And that's part of your mental strength. And when you start doing that, and when you start, it's like a promise you keep to yourself. And particularly when we have issues that are rooted in not having our needs met as a child, when you start keeping little promises to yourself, like doing your prayer, that's something that your inner child takes as an act of love.
Yeah.
And that in itself is healing.
And it's worth celebration.
Definitely.
And just talking about, some people might find it difficult to stand there in front of prayer out of love for Allah and out of like wanting that deep connection with Allah. And if you want to attain that, but you're struggling to attain that, you might want to ask yourself how much love you have for yourself and how much you connect with yourself. That's probably where the actual problem is. The problem isn't with your ability to connect with Allah or to love Allah. No, the problem is that that's been veiled because of your inability to love yourself and connect with yourself. And that's not your fault. If you're not able to do that, it's not your fault. You were born with it, fitra, balance, as you said earlier, but your environment has taken that away from you and brought you to imbalance. And it's just about nurturing that again, doing things for yourself, taking care of yourself, doing things that you enjoy, treating yourself, congratulating yourself on the small wins, because it's the small wins that give you the big wins.
And the small wins, I mean, that's different from person to person.
Absolutely.
For one person who's been through a very difficult time, getting out of bed in the morning is a win.
Is a win,
and that's a big struggle, and it's climbing a mountain, and that shouldn't be taken lightly. You should never say to yourself, oh, big deal, I just made it out of bed, that's all I can do.
And even actually, if you live with someone or know someone who resembles some of what we're saying, show them kindness and maybe celebrate their wins with them.
Yeah, and remind them to celebrate their wins.
Yeah, and this way, when we help each other and we build each other, we're actually building ourselves as well. Because if you are struggling to be kind or show or celebrate someone else's win, chances are you're struggling to be kind and celebrate your own win. So really, it always goes back to the self.
Yeah. Ooh, profound things there, Madhia.
It happens from time to time when I hang around with you enough.
Really? I don't think it's me. So, what we're saying is, again, that these
I don't think
things
we've said it enough.
We haven't said it enough. These things are interlinked.
I think people are switching off now. I'm joking.
They're interlinked. Don't treat them as separate. Don't split yourself up into separate compartments.
Yeah. Your spiritual self, like my prayer, my health, my exercise, like my eating, my exercise, my work, my family. Bring them all into you. And we should talk about that actually when they are misaligned, how that brings us into misalignment and imbalance. If you want to know more about how misaligned, when different aspects of a life like finance, family, fitness, alliteration, anyway, that was not intended. Now I'm under pressure for another alliteration, but no, no pressure. What have I said?
Fitness, family,
health, like in terms of food, contact with nature, what you do for yourself for revitalization. When these are not aligned with each other, when they don't work together, that can cause imbalance. And if you want to know how that causes imbalance, just drop us a message, or you can text us on 07411 191062 and just say balance, and I'll know what you mean. Or you can comment on the live stream on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, or Twitch. Just type in balance and I'll know what you mean. Or call in on 07411 191062.
There are some strange and funny things going on in the studio here. Funny signals, reminders.
It's a good job the camera's switched off. This is why we switched off the camera. So you can't see what happens behind the scenes. Anything but climbing on desks.
Yes. We'll get there too, I'm sure.
Come back.
So,
can you, sorry. And before we move on to our tool of the week, our tip of the week, which is going to come with drum roll, by the way. Anyway, can you talk to us about kind of like prayer and fasting, and maybe in the Mi'raj of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and how are they representing the importance of the unison of the mind, body, and soul?
Yeah, very, very easily. Basically, is that the acts of worship in Islam are not a spiritual act where your body is divorced from them or your mind is divorced from them. So take fasting, for example, that takes obviously mental strength, but it also takes physical strength, and it takes you abstaining from food, but it also...
You remind me about intention as well.
Yeah, right, and that's a mental act or an act of the heart. So these acts, which are spiritual acts, they are means of getting closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They involve
And bringing ourselves back to balance.
and bringing ourselves back to balance. What are they? What do they involve? They involve us physically, mentally, spiritually, as a whole human being. Prayer, for example, we don't sit with our eyes closed and, just kind of...
eyes can be closed and still...
Well, in the ritual prayer, according to the Hanafi madhab, they shouldn't be.
Well, if it helps concentration,
it can be. But I guess my point is that we don't
This is
just
not a
sit
fiqh
still.
discussion here, though. Almost was.
No, we are not discussing fiqh.
No.
Yeah, my point is that you're actually physically doing something in prayer, right? You're bending, you're standing up, you're bowing down. So this is your body in prayer, but then your mind is in prayer because you're focused on the words that you're saying.
And we're encouraged to connect with Allah.
And that's your spiritual connection with Allah going on there. So you're there as a whole
unison.
The same with fasting. And the Mi'raj, I mean, there's this discussion about the Mi'raj, but we know that
can you tell everyone what you mean about the Mi'raj, what you're referring to?
The Mi'raj is the ascension of the Prophet ﷺ up to the heavens. Which is when the Prophet peace be upon him went up to the heavens and he was given the prayer salah as a gift.
It was revealed,
for his ummah, and he met all the prophets, etc. And he went, he witnessed the people in heaven and the people in hell, and he came back and reported all of that to us. And it came to him at a time when he was, outwardly his message was going through, his mission was going through a very difficult time, and then this really amazing event happened that brought him a whole load of hope. But the Mi'raj itself, for the Prophet ﷺ, was not a spiritual experience. Some people will try and argue that, but the scholars have spoken out against this and said, no, the Mi'raj was a physical experience for the Prophet ﷺ. He physically went from where he was in Makkah and he traveled up. It wasn't just his spirit that did the traveling. So again, that was a complete physical, mental, emotional, spiritual experience for the Prophet ﷺ. And this is, I think, really, this is something that makes our religion unique in so many ways. I mean, in some other religions, you have this idea of, transcending your physical self or getting above your desires or, obliterating your desire. We don't have that in Islam. It's about directing yourself as a whole towards God, including your desires. You still have them, but you use them in the worship of Allah, right? In order to draw closer to Allah. So in Islam, we don't have this idea of splitting. Our religion is something spiritual and everything else is something separate. We just don't have that. Our religion is not confined to the masjid, to a physical space. The whole earth is a place of prayer for us. And all of these things, again, we keep hammering that point home, that we cannot be compartmentalized and split into mental, physical, spiritual health. They are all interlinked. And well-being and balance in any of them is well-being and balance in all of them.
Fantastic. So you really made me reflect upon this in this moment, is how Allah, they say that Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam was given the prayer as a gift, and I can really see another reason why it was given as a gift, because a gift to help us bring ourselves back into balance 5 times a day.
Yeah.
That's superb. We've got less than 2 minutes. I think it's a drum roll time and time to share tip of the week. You can't hear this drum roll, but I can hear it. Drum roll. and sorry, Dr. Ruqia is going to share the tip of the week.
Introduce. I heard some disappointed sighs from the people listening, but please don't be disappointed. Madhia, maybe you can go into why we think this is your tip of the week this week.
Yeah, so tip of the week this week is breathing. And we've spoken about breathing before, if you follow us on Instagram, etc. Why is breathing important, and why does breathing help us come back into balance? Breathing is a use of the mind and the body, but also a lot of our teachers tell us that breathing is actually a spiritual act. But you can go ahead and do your research to find out about that. How do we do the breathing? It's diaphragmatic. Why is it diaphragmatic? Go on, Dr. Ruqia, you can...
Well, the diaphragm is a muscle that's sort of the at our waist at the bottom.
Yep.
And it links to the other muscles. It links to the chest muscles, obviously, but it also links down to the pelvic muscles.
Yep.
So relaxing that and really breathing into that helps us relax all of our muscles in our torso, which is great for balance.
Because we also keep our emotions there.
Yeah.
So it's about bringing our emotions back into balance. So if you're ever feeling anxious, overwhelmed, or, sometimes overthinking, you need to do some diaphragmatic breathing. You may be wondering how. You breathe in for 6 seconds, hold your breath for 3 seconds, breathe out for 6 seconds, and hold your breath for 3 seconds. I'm going to leave you with that. Come back next week.
Thank you so much for listening.
No, I'm wrong, actually. We've got 10 more minutes. Thank you for that stare. I'm so glad because I was rushing. Okay, we've got time to talk about breathing more. I don't know what happened.
Okay, right, the breathing. So there's loads of different breathing
I took 2
exercises.
weeks off. That's what happened.
Well, I think we've got 4 minutes. I don't know how we've got 10.
Yeah, we've got, 6 minutes. 4 minutes, yeah. No?
6.
5 minutes. Go on. I've got 5 minutes to explain. Thank God, because I really had more things to say about breathing.
Go on.
So, so the breathing is, we've been talking about bringing ourselves back into balance. And to bring ourselves back into balance, we've been talking about the mind, body and soul. And I just mentioned how, and Dr. Ruqia explained how breathing affects our physical body. So what happens when you can talk about the vagus nerve in a moment, but what happens when you're feeling overwhelmed, overthinking, anxious, depressed, PTSD or anything sort of like mental health, but also when you've got a physical health, sometimes maybe you experience like a discomfort in your stomach, or maybe you're feeling a pain in your shoulder, or maybe your hip, or maybe your knee. Breathing actually helps you relieve some of that pain because it brings you back into balance. Remember what we said? Any ailment is being out of balance. It's about being imbalanced. And so why does breathing help the mental health? Did you want to just go into that, talking about the vagus nerve?
When it comes to regulating our nervous system, we have these two, we call them autonomic states. So we have these two states that we're in, either one or the other at any given time. So one of them is what we call the parasympathetic state. This is your rest and digest state. That's when you're calm and you're comfortable and you feel safe, and so your body is able to focus on things like digesting and repair, and where your mental faculties, your higher mental faculties, are able to be sort of leading the way, rather than your limbic system, which is the more fight
you'll
and
feel
fight.
like you can make decisions, you'll feel
Cognitively,
relaxed,
you're
sharp,
focused.
you've got wisdom, and
all of those things.
Yeah.
So that's the state that we want to be in most of the time.
That's the parasympathetic state.
Parasympathetic state, also known as the rest and digest state. There's another state called the parasympathetic state.
No, the sympathetic state.
Sorry, sympathetic state.
It's a good job I'm listening.
Yeah, good job you're here. So that's your fight and flight. That's what happens when we're in any kind of danger, and we need to really give as much fuel to our muscles as we can in order to be able to either fight this threat or to be able to run from it.
Because imagine, if you want a metaphor, it's like, imagine like you've seen a lion and a lion is about to attack you. That's literally what the body is going into, that fear, fight, flight, freeze, or, the fawn is the other one, yeah.
Yeah, so in that, the sympathetic state does serve a purpose. It's not there without reason. It's not a negative thing. It's just, it needs to be there at the right time, and then it needs to switch off when the danger disappears.
Because if the lion is about to grab you, you do need to run for your life.
Yeah, anyway. I wouldn't advise trying to fight the lion. so
or freeze. Well, actually, does freeze work?
It could work. So
what about fawn? People pleasing. Sort of please.
Stop. Stop.
Right.
So, could work, depending on the lion, I guess.
Power of the mind. Sorry,
So
don't try this at home, please.
Don't. But hopefully in this country, none of you are going to be walking across any lions anytime soon. But your mind does think you're in a state of fighting something at any given time of day. For example, you receive an unpleasant email from your boss, or you get a text message from your other half that you're not happy about, or your child falls off something, or whatever it might be. We go into these states. The thing is, we need to be able to come out of that state.
Yeah.
But because of the way modern life is structured now, we're constantly being bombarded with text messages, emails, things on social media, images from anywhere and everywhere that are unpleasant. And so we're constantly in that state of fight and flight, of that sympathetic state. Now, there's a nerve in the body called the vagus nerve that if we can regulate and really switch on that vagus nerve, it helps us bring us from the sympathetic fight and flight to the parasympathetic rest and digest. And rest and digest is really about healing. So in order to get us into that,
And being in balance.
And in order to get into that parasympathetic rest and digest state and to switch the vagus nerve on, there's a whole load of practices that you can indulge in, and breathing is one of the most potent ones. So that's one of the reasons why we recommend breathing practices, to get your vagus nerve switched on, to get it sharper, to get it toned, and therefore you're able to get into that parasympathetic, relaxed, healing state much easier.
And when you are breathing, just let your tongue touch the palate and connect it. That's going to help the whole energy to travel around your body and relieve any physical ailment that you have.
Or it also does, to have your tongue against the palate, is it stops your mouth breathing, and then therefore your nose breathing. And that's really important, because actually the mouth wasn't designed for breathing. The mouth is for chewing and digesting. The nose is for breathing, and when we breathe through the nose, we actually produce chemicals that open up our blood vessels and again calm us down.
Okay, so tip of this week is to breathe diaphragmatically through your nose. 6-3-6-3. Thank you so much for listening. It is actually the end of the show now, and we do look forward to connecting with you next week. Dr. Ruqia, I want to say thank you.
Thank you so much for listening once again. It'll be smoother next week, we promise.
No, let's not